Yes. I ruined it there, didn't I? Tell us a bit about that and how it's the story of this show, mate. It really is. Hello and welcome to episode 145 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but on this weekly podcast, I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, to share some marketing street knowledge that I hope will inspire your inner rockstar. Come say hello. You can find me and all my guests and the show notes at rockstarcmo.com. And we are Rockstar CMO on the socials and proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. It's Saturday, the 17th of December, 2022. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've had a good week and you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. In this week's episode, I ask our resident Rockstar advisor, Jeff Clark, to pick his favourite predictions. Todd Irwin, Chief Strategy Officer at Phaser, returns to chat about branding. And we wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a cocktail and a marketing thought. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our resident Rockstar CMO advisor and former research director at Forrester Sirius Decision.
Hello. Ian, how are you doing? Do you want to come into the studio? We're recording Christmas songs for the holiday season.
Of course we are. Yes, well, it's now the time where I can wish you happy holidays or happy Christmas.
Happy holidays.
You celebrate.
Yes. And happy New Year's. Because I won't be here until we get into the 2023 season.
I know, I was going to break that slowly to the listener, Jeff, but so sadly, Jeff will be away for 2 weeks after this week, so we're going to miss a bit of Jeff. So, I don't know why I'm bothering to do the podcast for 2 weeks. I mean, everybody's here for you, Jeff. I don't know,
but yeah. But I'll be investigating marketing trends in Norway, so I'll come back with some interesting information.
And some of the finest 70s tunes.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe some ABBA.
And you're flying into the teeth of cold weather, aren't you, too? Because we're all obsessed with the weather. So we're having a bit of a frigid freeze here, but you're going to the Nordics, aren't you?
Yes, I am. So, well, it'll be cold, but we're prepared. We have all of our winter weather gear ready to go.
Yeah, it's beautiful there. It's beautiful. Finland, isn't it, or Norway?
Norway.
Lovely.
Yes, don't get them all confused. They're very different.
No, I wouldn't. No, I mean, I know better than that, right? Because I live near there, and I've been to all of those countries, and they're but just lovely, and especially this time of year with the Christmas markets and all that good stuff. I think you're going to have a great time, obviously. Anyway, Jeff, before you jet off to the land of Saint Nick, because he lives in Norway.
He's way up.
Way up
at the top.
We can't escape the fact that it's prediction season, and we've talked a little bit about predictions and stuff over the year, but I know that you've plucked out 4 for us to choose from, to discuss this week.
And offer some advice.
Yeah, it's almost as it's as traditional at this time of year, isn't it? As a potluck lunch or some
Yeah, or Ugly
Whatever.
Sweater Party or any of those things.
It's marketing predictions. So where should we start with these marketing predictions? You come up with 4, and I've actually got some notes on what you've come up with. So should we start with your first one, Jeff? What's your first prediction?
Well,
and are these in any order? Are they just...
They are. I mean, there's 2 that actually relate well together, but they're not really in any order. It's certainly not priority order.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first one relates to what we were talking about last week when one of the things, because we were talking about marketing technology, but one of the premises was that people are really going to be more focused on their current customer base and their customer health. And so one of the things that I heard one of my other colleagues from the Forrester Days, Ross Graber, talking about related to that was that, even though, this might be a priority, very few companies, there's only 10% of companies put a customer health metric on their CMO leadership dashboard. Or you could say CMOs, only 10% of CMOs put that on your dashboard.
Yeah.
And which is, so there's a major misstep there, because if we are really focused on customer health, then then we need to be saying what's marketing, basically what are the trends and how is marketing impacting that.
All right. Let me hold you on that one for a moment. So customer health is really important for us at the moment, right? Because we're predicting there's going to be a recession next year, right? So customer health is getting a lot of focus at the moment. So this is a post by Ross Graber from Forrester. It's time to measure customer health for your executive dashboard, which I'll include a link to in the show notes. So what are the sorts of, we need to show this on an executive dashboard, is what you're saying, right? And is that the role of marketing then to do that, do you think, from a customer health perspective?
Well, so certainly, I mean, there's certainly a couple of reasons for it. One is that marketing is taking a greater responsibility in customer experience and things that relate to customer health. Secondly, the content of your, if a CMO is putting together a dashboard that they're sharing with the executive team, so not necessarily just their internal, dashboard, but what they're sharing with the executive team, it really should be driven by the corporate goals. And so if one of the corporate goals is to make sure we're measuring and impacting customer health, then that's got to be on there. And one of the things that we used to, I used to advise companies on was kind of like, with a dashboard, however you're putting the dashboard together, whether it's in PowerPoint or whether it's on an analytics tool, is kind of like think about what are those 4, 5, 6 big customer goals, and then a part of that real estate on the dashboard to those goals, and what are the set of metrics that you can put together that shows you the trends, and then shows you also what marketing is doing to impact those trends. And if it's possible to actually show a correlation, we're doing more with customer references and social advocacy, et cetera, like that. And you can see that our customer satisfaction scores and our NPS scores are actually increasing.
All right, let's get on to that then. So weirdly enough, like you say, 10% of CMOs leadership dashboards only have a customer health metric on their executive board, which is weird because almost every organization is going to talk about customer satisfaction as being a top organizational key, OKR, all that kind of good stuff, right? So what are the metrics do you think we need to consider to get onto that board?
Well, certainly there's the overall satisfaction and health. So customer sat, NPS scores, sales may have some sort of sales indicator of a health score. Where are we with the account? And there's any number of ways of trying to do that. And then you'd say, okay, so what are some of the marketing tools that we can work with that may be impacting some of those scores, such as the number of quality references, the number of case studies, the number of advocates. If you're using an advocacy tool and you're looking at the engagement in social or an engagement on in other forums by your advocates, and actually, if you just also look across, because this is one of the things that I've done in the past, is look at customer engagement overall. Look over all the various ways you have of touching a customer. Can you look at the engagement and say, if we see a decline, we need to make sure we highlight that
Right.
so that the proper account management can take action.
Right. So you're looking deeper and beyond just CSAT and NPS, right? You're actually
absolutely.
looking at some of these other
Absolutely.
metrics. All right, cool. So that's our first prediction. We probably, you know what we're like for time. And what's the so the prediction is it's time to measure customer health through your executive dashboard from Ross Gaber at Forrester. What's the action from that we need to do?
The action is really
to deliver on that.
is to define, well, for one, understand what that priority or corporate goal is, and then define and develop meaningful customer health metrics for the presentation, and make sure you've got goals set and you've put, these high level measures on the dashboard. And it obviously there may be an aspect of the technology that you're using. Where are you pulling the information from that you can actually establish these metrics and keep them up to date?
Cool. Okay, so let's move on to number 2. So what's your second prediction?
Well, number 2 is probably a prediction that is, I think we've seen on the charts for the past couple of years, which is customer experience is growing more important. And this comes from Marketing Insider Group. I think it was a gentleman by the name of Michael Brenner who wrote the post. And the thing is that this might be a kind of a duh statement, but what was in the report was citing another report from PricewaterhouseCoopers that said that 73% of people say that customer experience is an important factor, but only 49% think companies provide a good one.
Wow, right. So there's a gap there.
Yeah, there's a gap, and when you dig further into it and you look at some of the other sources, that a lot of the gap is that there's a real skills shortage, which is challenging teams that are in charge of customer experience. And so the lack of skills, whether it's design thinking, experience design, survey design, journey mapping, all these are all things that are they're not simple. They're not simple skills, and so you may put the wrong people in charge of these things. And it's really important that you get a handle on how you're looking at customer experience and how you're actioning the ways you can improve that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the first two there, right out of the box, there are about customers, right? And it's also, I think, your point there that customer experience is growing more important for customers. I mean, when has that ever not been true? So that's interesting there. But I think that there's a lot of pressure on us right now, isn't there? That our existing customers are, retention of customers is going to be very important right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what also, again, cited in this article was the fact that the definition of what marketing is in charge of is continuing to expand, and if companies who've had improving customer experience as one of their goals, and it's like, well, nobody else is doing this, and sales is too focused on the revenue number, and support's too focused on their issues, and so this ends up going to marketing, and marketing has to be able to put the team together.
Yeah, so the CMO is becoming the advocate for the customer then internally at a senior level. Yeah, okay. So the CMO, so is that the action that we as CMOs need to start to look at? I mean, it's so easy to get drawn into demand gen and brand and all that kind of stuff that you're being asked to by the CEO. But as everybody knows, if we can retain your customers, you've got less of a pressure on demand generation. So what is it that we should be doing then to make this happen?
Well, the CMO needs to take control. So as opposed to sitting back and waiting for someone to say, who volunteers to take this, they need to take control. They need to staff up with the requisite skills. There's just no doubt about it, since that seems to be the major gap. And it may be helpful to have an outside consultant or an analyst firm. I know this is one of the things that, you could go to a Forrester or a Gartner or a number of organizations to do some sort of skills gap analysis. What are the skills we need to have? What do we currently have? What's the gap? And then, kind of pursue from a hiring perspective to get people in there who can, build the strategies that differentiate you. And certainly you don't want to just you fall into the ugly trap of we're trying to model ourselves after the CX leaders like an Amazon or an Apple, and let's do what they do. I mean, you really have to make sure, again, like through journey mapping and looking at the data, that you are
Yeah.
trying to improve a
Yeah.
process that your customers want to follow.
Yeah, well, it's delivering on the brand promise, isn't it?
Yes.
It's when we always talk about brand, is the fact that it's everything about an organization, including the customer experience. So,
Yeah.
and then when you talk about Amazon and Apple, you know, people walk into those experiences full of brand promise, don't they? And you need to do the same thing. So that's the second one, which was called Customer Experience is Growing More Important for Customers, and it was by Michael Brenner on Marketing Insider Group. What's your third?
Third one, which relates very much to the last one, is cross-functional collaboration teams you yield worse outcomes, and this comes from Gartner.
This really stood out to me when you shared this one that we were going to talk about. That just doesn't make any sense as a sentence, does it? Cross-functional collaboration yields worse outcomes. I mean, you would not expect that. So, what are Gartner suggesting?
I think, well, what they found in their survey, that there were these 405, the majority of their marketing leaders they interviewed said that teams that worked independently, kind of more in a functional model, outperformed teams that were working as collaborators, cross-functional. And while they believe in the collaborative approach, they're less likely to succeed in what they're trying to do, whether it's customer acquisition goals or, as we were just talking about, with customer experience is by definition a cross-functional collaboration effort. I mean, even if marketing takes ownership, you've got to work with everybody around the company to improve it. And one of the other things that struck me about this is because I was listening to another podcast, which I don't want to admit that I listen to another podcast, but I was listening to another podcast, and there was a guy who was involved in computer science, innovation, and he was saying, it's interesting that our collaboration tools that we think of, email, Slack, chat, things like that, have not yielded productivity improvements, and so we've sort of assumed that they are, but we're getting into this problem for knowledge workers where the way we're working in terms of kind of the constant interruptions is reducing our ability to actually be effective. And so I think and his recommendation, part of my recommendation here, is you got to be thinking about the process of how people are working, in addition to the fact that you're having them, collaborate. And there's lots of aspects to how, managing cross-functional teams, I mean, a lot of it comes out of the whole agile marketing world where it's like, you need clear executive support. You need clear measurable goals. You need a work environment that enables team members to concentrate on their deliverables, not get interrupted by, meetings and other things. And you need to ensure they have dedicated leadership that's focused on the team productivity, because it can't be we're assembling this cross-functional team and we're putting the director of digital marketing in charge of it. I know he's got his day job, but we're going to have him run this thing over here too. That's a recipe for the team not making its goals. Yeah.
So really, the prediction is poorly run cross-functional collaboration yields worse outcomes, right? Which is even more of an obvious statement, really, isn't it? Yeah. But I can't remember whether we were talking about it on the microphone or whether we were just talking about it off air last week. We were talking. I think we mentioned the fact that this the tax, the work and productivity tax on interruption is huge, isn't it?
It's huge. Absolutely.
I was talking about some early stuff that I used to read when I was doing product management, which is from Joel Spolsky, and he would talk about it's 20 minutes or so that it takes a developer to get back into the groove, and he would advocate developers have their own offices. Anyway, and that was before Slack, and that was so
and that's one of the chief responsibilities of somebody running an agile team is to get the interruptions out of the way, and anything that's going to stop them from doing their work, get it out of the way so that they can be productive.
That's just I mean, and it's the forgotten art of management, really, isn't it? That sort of thing.
It is.
How do you enable your people to be as productive as is right for them? All right, so that's cross-functional collaboration yields worse outcomes. What's the fourth, Jeff?
Fourth. And not last, one that's near and dear to my heart is greenwashing becomes a financial risk
Cool.
This comes from our friends at Forrester, so we're back with the Forrester crew. But
Yeah.
they noted in the past 18 months, 10 companies, including some really big ones like a BNY Mellon, Keurig, Walmart, were fined between $1.5 and $5.6 billion because they were making claims about what they were doing from a sustainability perspective that were not actually true. Like last year was the European Union found that half of green claims lacked any evidence. And so, there's, they actually are looking at that there's likely going to be 10 companies that will incur, $5 billion or more in fines in the coming year. So this is definitely, the prediction is people are going to be caught. So, get your house in order and avoid the risk. You don't want the hit to the bottom line that causes.
Well, the other thing as well, I mean, the financial risk I would imagine for firms with this greenwashing stuff is actually customer and prospect sentiment, isn't it? I mean, I guess a massive, global campaign that talks about green credentials and you get fined $1 million, I would imagine for a huge organization that's probably, you can probably take the hit, right? But
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but you can't take the hit is the brand reputation the tarnishing. And I think, I was surprised to learn about this actually from when we were preparing for this, because you'd think there'd be a bigger deal in the press, wouldn't you, about this kind of stuff? You'd think that you'd think that they'd be all over this stuff if somebody was doing the greenwashing thing and got found out. So what is it that we need to do then as CMOs to make sure that we don't get busted?
I think, so, the CMO really has to create sustainability communication messages that have integrity. So, don't make claims that aren't measurable and transparent. It's and so therefore you've got to go through the rigor of understanding what are we trying to measure, what's the company. Let's not try to overdo it by misstating bold claims. We're going to be carbon neutral by 2035, and then it's like you find you're backsliding. Everything. It's. I think your point is right on the money. Is that the bad press, and I think the this as an important press item is only going to increase in the future years. So the bad press is not worth the hit it's going to take on your reputation, and it's what's interesting is to me is in context of some other things where you're seeing companies like a lot in the tech space that are the CEO gets caught doing dumb things or whatever, the FTX scandal, and it erodes people's trust in corporations, and so you've really got to work hard to stand out and make sure you're one that is willing to stand up to your pronouncements of what you're doing for the global community good.
Yeah, and also, I mean, these sorts of things like marketing ruins everything, isn't it? I mean, the trouble is everybody starts to believe nobody, and so you need to work even harder if your green credentials are authentic, right? So all right, so that's our 4, and I'll include links to all those in the show notes. So that's a different kind of 4 to what I've been reading. Actually, there's a nice broad mix you get there. Focus on customers with measuring customer health, customer experience importance. Interesting thing about cross-functional teams from Gartner, which I think is, poorly run cross-functional teams don't yield results. Well, there's a shock. And then, but I think this greenwashing thing is important. I think we all need to pay attention to this. So, as I say, I'll include links to all of these in the show notes. And then, so the final thing on our agenda before you whiz off to the wonderful Nordics is what song are we going to do this week, Jeff?
Well, I believe actually you had suggested this one. Gorillas ends with a Z. Their song 19-2000. I don't know how they came up with the name of that. Maybe it was probably the serial number on the tape they were using. But it's got a theme about the world is spinning too fast, but I'm keeping my groove on. So a lot of these things are failure of people to just do the right work. So if you're doing the right work, keep your groove on.
I love it.
That's
all right, mate. Well,
I'll
play out with. I can't remember what year that is actually, and we didn't put it in the notes, so I'll add that when I do the edit. But so Gorillas 19-2000. I'll play it with that, and then I'll speak to you in a couple of weeks, mate. You have
Awesome.
a wonderful Christmas and New Year.
You too.
And enjoy your family out there, and I'll speak to them.
And happy holidays to everybody out there.
Thank you. Yes. Oh yeah. Why am I saying thank you? Get to the people out there. Yes. I'll just grab anything. Really. That's terrible.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. I'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
The world is spinning too fast. I'm on that Nike shoes to keep myself tethered to the days I tried to lose. My mama said to slow down, you must make your own shoes. Stop dancing to the music of the days in a happy mood. Keep my groove on.
Thank you, Jeff. And that was Gorillas with 19-2000 from 2001. I hope you've enjoyed Jeff's contributions this year. I certainly have. And he'll be back in the new year. And please let us know if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss. You know where to find us. rockstarcmo.com. Right, it's time for me to go backstage with my guest, Todd Irwin, Chief Strategy Officer and founder of New York-based brand strategy and creative agency Phaser, who we met back in episode 137. If you missed that episode, Todd has over 30 years of brand strategy experience with companies like Coca-Cola, Nikon, Verizon, Walmart, Pepsi, as well as a host of SMBs and early-stage funded growth companies. And with this experience, has developed a compelling methodology that delivers business-to-brand strategic alignment that positions companies more competitively in their market. We promised to dive into some of the topics we discussed last time, so it's great to have Todd back. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi, Todd. Welcome back to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm good, Ian. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And we had you on episode 137 last time. And for folks that, for some reason, didn't listen to that episode, tell us a bit about yourself.
I am the Chief Strategy Officer at a branding agency in New York called Phaser. F-A-Z-E-R is how you spell it. And I've been doing this stuff for a while, about 20 plus years of being either creative director, chief creative officer, chief strategy officer now for branding agencies, working with all types of companies, large, small, in the middle, all that stuff. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, we had a good discussion about your career last time and the sort of work that you do at Phaser.
Yep.
And I am not going to make the Star Trek reference this time. Not once. Not once.
You know, it's funny because when we were coming up with a name, it didn't come up, and so it's all about phasing, right? Are you unfazed by a brand, or are you phased by a brand? That's where that was the concept. And somebody said to us, "Well, what about the Star Trek phaser?" Well, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I wasn't the first idiot to say it, at least.
Yeah.
So last time you were on, we were talking about branding, and the reason for having you back is I noticed that you published an article for Branding Mag, which you share quite a lot of these in LinkedIn, so I've become a bit of a fan of this magazine. And we were talking about the ROI of branding, and you've written the article you've written, and it's got a great title: "The Secret Brand Strategy Apple and Starbucks Won't Tell You." Sorry, depositioning the secret brand strategy Apple and Starbucks won't tell you. I ruined it there, didn't I? Tell us a bit about that and how it's the story of this show, mate. It really is. Tell us about how just recap why brand is important. You know, what was important about this article for you?
Well, I think anything that we do, from a insight standpoint, is about, just delivering valuable information for business owners. So, for us, depending on who we're talking to, it's what kind of information can we deliver that's going to help them grow their business. And, specifically in that article, we're talking about a brand strategy approach, depositioning, which is an approach to brand positioning, which most companies do. My thing is, or my opinion on it, which is in that article, is that depositioning, I believe, is the most effective way to position a brand in a market. And it's quite a complicated process to figure out how to do that. It's a core of what we do as a company, not to get overly promotional here about us, but
That's okay.
we know it works. We know
Yeah,
it works. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and as you say in the article, right, and I think this is interesting, this is where we are actually as an industry, isn't it, at the moment? There are a bunch of approaches that everybody's talking about around branding, around disruption, differentiation, relevance, unique selling propositions, personalization, all the buzzwords. And we're hearing a lot about brand purpose at the moment, which we'll get onto in a bit. Sure. What's the most important for you, and where does that fit in with this idea of depositioning, which again we'll expand on in a bit?
Well, I mean, depositioning gets to the heart of relevance. Okay, I mean, all those things are important, differentiation, disruption, so forth and so on. But relevance it's the reason people buy, right? They, when they get onto the street and they're looking to buy, there's a reason. They either have a desire for something or they're trying to solve a problem, right? A pain point. And depositioning gets to the heart of that. The process of getting to depositioning is figuring out what are the most relevant things that a customer is looking for, right? What's the pain point that they're dealing with, right? And then because most competitors are looking at it that way, they're all trying to sell that same thing, right? They're trying to sell that fast, shiny brand. With depositioning, it's the intersection of those two customer things, right? The desires and the pain points. And then also looking at the competition in the market and figuring out, okay, what are their weaknesses? And how do we do a good job solving the problem for the customer, and at the same time highlight the negatives of the competitors.
Right.
So you're shining a light on the competitor weaknesses, essentially.
Right.
That's at the heart of positioning.
Yeah, and in the title of the article, you mentioned Apple and Starbucks specifically. So why do you think they're nailing it when it comes to depositioning in that respect?
Well, Apple's nailing it with privacy. They were up against Google and Facebook and Amazon with their home technology. Siri was first to market, but really Amazon won, Alexa won, and Google was in second place, and Facebook did a good job too. Apple lost, and Apple never loses. So what did they do? They figured out what the pain point was that those companies had, which was transparency. People were concerned that Alexa was listening to me. So Apple turned that around on them, and they positioned their brand around privacy, and they've been doing that for about 5 years now. It's a classic example of depositioning that's worked. If you look at their stock price, their valuation, since they've done it, it's just, and of course, I'm not saying that's the only reason their valuation has increased, but it definitely has worked for them. I mean, Tim Cook's a bit of a genius. Yeah.
It's incredible, isn't it? Because whenever you have a conversation with anybody about brand, it's always about Apple. But in this, this is a very specific strategy they've taken, isn't it, around privacy, which isn't just about the standard sort of, why does everybody love Apple? Well, quality of products, blah, 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 Steve Jobs, blah, blah, blah. But actually, this is a very deliberate, seems to be a very deliberate strategy, isn't it? Yeah, brand strategy.
It is, and they've positioned their brand since the beginning around this idea called usability. Right, it's the best designed product. It's easy to use. It's so simple. It's ultra simple. This was Steve Jobs' thing, right? I'm going to make a better product that's easier to use. Whether it was the Walkman, or whatever, right? I mean, that's what he does. So it's a big shift for them. Again, they didn't lose that part of their story, right? That usability factor, it's still there. Yeah. But they're leaning into privacy hard. And
also, I think we might have mentioned this because we briefly mentioned this thing, I think, last time we chatted. Yeah. But what I like about it's so defensible for them, isn't it? Because nobody, if anybody tries to replicate that story around the other big techs, the rest of us will laugh, right?
Yeah. The story that I always tell is, 5 years ago, the terrorist attack in Orlando, Florida. All those people were killed at that club, and the law enforcement, they killed the terrorist, but they found his phone, and the FBI went to Apple to unlock the phone, and Tim Cook said, no, I won't do it. Right. And I mean, you can't attach yourself to a brand positioning better than that. I mean, he owned privacy when he made that decision.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
pretty cool.
So that was Apple was the example that you used in the article. You've also written a white paper on this, which I'll also link to, by the way, in the show notes. You talked about Starbucks too. So how are Starbucks using this depositioning strategy?
It's a great story at Starbucks. I mean, Howard Schultz, another, so smart. Who was the big elephant in the sector was Dunkin' Donuts. Fast coffee, 50 cents, in and out, but it's an eyesore in the community. The brand was, kind of cheap looking. Nobody wanted a Starbucks. I'm sorry, nobody wanted a Dunkin' Donuts on their corner. Howard Schultz's story. He's in Europe. He's going to cafes in Italy and so forth and so on. And they just had this different vibe. People went to cafes. They spent the day there, right? They had coffee. They ate, they hung out, they did business, right? And he thought about it. He's like, I know I can kill Dunkin' Donuts here if I come back with the same strategy. And so he depositioned Dunkin' Donuts. He created Starbucks, right? You go there and you can get all those things. And conceptually, which I thought was really brilliant, what I think is really brilliant, is this idea that they came up with, this positioning concept called the third place, which is you've got home, you've got work, and you got Starbucks. They build their brand around that. And they also, the theme of it is about community, right? Community of people, but also the way that they design their stores into communities is quite brilliant. It's never an eyesore. It's always a welcome thing. So it's a great example of depositioning. So.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked a bit about depositioning last time, and you touched on some of the elements of it in terms of being relevant to your audience and your customers and how you position yourself against your competitors. When you're working with clients and you're introducing this depositioning idea, where do you start with them? What are the things you're looking for in a brand in order to do this depositioning?
Yeah, I mean, it's deep dive research. We go right into it. Analyze the customer, right? Figure out what are they looking for? What are those pain points? So we're doing pain point workshops with our clients. We're looking at the market, unpacking the competitors, right? What are they delivering as far as the product goes? How are they satisfying their customers? And most importantly, to get to a depositioning strategy, what are their weaknesses? What are they not delivering that we can deliver better? And so a lot of times what happens is when you're doing this, when you're doing projects like this, it filters into product design, solution design for companies as well. We've had that happen quite a bit. We're focused on brand strategy, but it rolls into business strategy and product strategy. But it all starts with like deep dive research, figuring out what those pain points are, desires for the customers, the weaknesses for competitors. And once we have those figured out, then we get into the scrum with clients to figure out like what's a concept that we can come up with from a messaging standpoint, similar to Apple's privacy, Starbucks is the third place. What is it for that client that's going to work? And then we build it. We build it out.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because there's a couple of things there from what you were saying. One is this idea that increasingly people are talking about brand as in it's actually a company strategy. It's no longer just marketing, right? It's if you're going to make these promises, then you need to live by those promises. Your product needs to fit that promise. The service that people get needs to fit that promise. So are you finding that is more prevalent where you're talking to a client where they say, oh my God, we're going to need to change something else about our business, not just the words we use or the creative?
Yeah, happens quite a lot. And they love that, by the way. Leadership loves that because what it does is it creates this sense of belonging for the employees. It gives them an internal purpose as a company. They see churn lower amongst employees, and more people wanting to work for them, especially when the work gets pushed out into market. So it's a highly, highly positive experience for companies when they do it and they do it right.
Yeah. And do you see a disconnect sometimes where the marketing team have got this aspiration, they want to be seen as something, but all your research reveals is actually you're an everyman brand, or you're a this brand, and you're trying to be something different, or you're trying to, in my world, you're trying to sell to the CMO when actually it's somebody much lower in the food chain that's buying your product. Do you find sometimes there's a little bit of an adjustment you need to make in terms of expectations there?
Yeah, they're always coming to us with problems, right? It's their messaging's not working for a reason. They think that they're saying the same thing that their competitors are saying. It's working for the competitors, not working for them. Why is it not working for us? Trying to figure that out. I think the biggest issue that we see is that the leadership on the marketing side, with the clients that come to us with new projects, they're just trying to do the same thing that everybody else is doing. And so there's a lot of replication of messaging and sales tactics. And this is where differentiation comes in, and why differentiation is important. But getting to a place where you are different takes positioning, the positioning work. So.
Yeah. And just to, I think we chatted about this last time, but it's B2C and B2B, isn't it, for you?
That's
it's
right.
A wide range of industries that you work with. Is there much difference when you do these kinds of strategies with your clients, when it is B2B to B2C, or is basically the strategy you take or the work that you do with them pretty similar?
Yeah, the approach is the same. It's the same exact approach 100%. Every company is different. Every sector is different, but the approach is always the same. You start with the research, you dive deep into it, then you go into strategy. Once you have strategy, you build out the creative, whether it's just messaging or whether it goes into visual identity and visual storytelling. But it's always the same process, 100%.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. This positioning stuff is fascinating. I'm gonna move on now to another article that you shared. You didn't write this one; you just shared it on LinkedIn, and I liked it because it was about brand purpose. And you chucked brand purpose into the Rockstar CMO swimming pool last time you were here, our portal to marketing hell. And the article you shared was. And again, a great title. I don't know what this branding mag does, but they certainly inspire some great
publication.
Titles.
I love them.
Purpose should be a business imperative, not an agency award strategy. And it's written by a guy called David Baldwin. And I'll include a link to that in the show notes. Now, I presume you agree. So where are you right now? I mean, I know you chucked this into the CMO Simple, but Rockstar CMO Simple. Where are you right now on brand purpose?
I think brand purpose is very important. But when it comes to how important it is, I have a bit of a contrarian opinion on this. A lot of agencies lead with, purpose is the end all be all, the most important thing out there. I do think it's important. It could be, secondary or tertiary in how important it is. I do think, though, that brand positioning and depositioning is the most, I think brand positioning is the most important thing to consider when coming up with a brand strategy. I do believe that depositioning, like I said earlier, is the most effective way to approach brand positioning. We see this a lot where clients come to us, say, we did this project with this agency, and it was all about coming up with our purpose. It's not moving the needle for us. We don't understand why, right? Well, it's because you're not figuring out the thing that's the most important, which is how do you solve a customer pain point, right? How do you deliver on what they're looking for, right? And then how do you do it in a way that is going to be better than your competitors? And that's the thing about depositioning. It works so well. You're essentially getting them to say yes about you and no about them.
Right.
Again, purpose is important. The company should have purpose. And so we do purpose work as well. Trying to do these things in ways that are different, important as well. But where do you start? And that's my thing, is that where you start with brand positioning and that most effective approach to it.
Right. I just listening to you chatting there, and we're talking about positioning and depositioning. Yep. In a nutshell, what's the difference between positioning and depositioning in your mind? Yeah,
so brand positioning is how you position a brand in a market, right?
Yeah.
David Acker is the king of positioning. He's written all these books on it. I recommend all of his books. Depositioning is an approach to brand positioning. I would say that, leading with brand purpose or trying to find something different or differentiation is an approach to brand positioning. How are we going to position our brand in the market? We're going to just be different than everybody else. That would be an approach to it. Depositioning is an approach to brand positioning. It's not one or the other, just to be clear.
Right. Fantastic. And we're coming up for time. It's always splendid spending some time with you,
Yeah, you
Todd.
too.
And I'll include links to these articles in the show notes.
Okay.
And when people spin the dial on the interwebs and they want to look for you, where are they going to find you, mate?
Phaser, FAZER.agency is our agency. You can find me on LinkedIn, either through our website or directly on LinkedIn. I'm not going to give out my telephone number on this. Okay.
Well,
I'm
if
around.
anybody I'm sure we can find you so easily. I don't think most people spam people by email, by phone anymore. Anyway, I think just letting people know you're on the internet is bad enough, isn't it? They'll find you. They'll track you down, fella. All right, Todd. Well, it was splendid having you on, and I look forward to having you on again. And if I don't speak to you before, enjoy the holidays, and I'll speak to you in the new year.
Right back at you, Ian. Have a good one.
Cheers, Todd. Bye-bye. Thank you, Todd. I will, of course, include the links to those articles we discussed in the show notes. I've got no association with the Branding Mag publication, the one we just discussed, but I've just discovered it, and it's worth a look at brandingmag.com. Right, it's time to wind down the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar and be transported away for a cocktail and a marketing thought with my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. It is, as they say, it's almost Christmas time. And so as we wind down the year and we get ready to maybe take a break from things and settle back, it's maybe the most important time for us to sit in the bar and drink a lot of drinks, because it's a time of, I find it that it's a time of reflection. It's also a time of celebration. It's also a time of commiseration, depending on how your year went. And it's,
went
so
fast. I can tell you that. I can't
it's a
believe
particularly poignant, punctuation, if you will, to the bar. And as such, I have a Christmas cocktail for us to drink. And I know you lament when I don't bring tequila out, so we will bring some tequila out here, and we will make a Christmas margarita, which of course is the best thing for, of course, red and green being the classic Christmas color. So how do you get a red drink? The easiest way to get a red drink is to use pomegranate. So this is technically a pomegranate margarita, but we'll call it the Christmas margarita. And it is relatively simple. It is exactly what you would think it would be. Pomegranate juice, which is probably a little harder to locate, especially for you, of course, but a little harder to locate in London than it is here in California. But pomegranate juice, use a Blanco or a Reposado tequila is my advice, because that will not overpower the drink and really make it much more of a sweet, wonderful Christmas margarita. And then I like to add a little Cointreau into this, just because it will sort of take a little sweetness out, and also just add a little zhuzh of something. Yeah. And then, of course, a little bit of lime juice, just to add in a little bit of lime juice. And if you prefer a sugar rim, that's great. You could also do a salt rim if you're kind of bold. But then adding a garnish of orange into the top of that, serving it on one rock, is lovely. And it makes for a really fantastic Christmas margarita.
That sounds great. And do the ingredients separate? So you've got the red and the green sitting there?
Not really, no. Maybe not.
So it's just a reddy greeny drink. I love that. All right, so I'm gonna stick some rocks into.
It becomes red. It is a red drink. Let's put it that way. And you can garnish with something a little green, such as a lime, or such as a sprig of Christmas tree, if you have
Nice.
things laying around. Holly
You'd think-
is always good
Yeah.
for a nice garnish.
We were talking before I clicked record about my unpreparedness for the conversations we have, and really I'm unprepared for Christmas drinks too, because I am going to use the ingredients on my desktop bar to remake your drink, and I'm of course going to use the most English of tequilas, which we both know is Hendrick's Gin.
That's right.
Stick a bit of that in there.
That's right.
And then I think you've mentioned about pomegranate juice before, and I think that we found that pomegranate juice, the most English of pomegranates was the cucumber, and the people that are best served to juice it, I think, are the people at Fever Tree, who not only juice the cucumber, they put it in tonic water for me.
You absolutely should get a sponsorship from them.
I'm working on it.
Because
Yeah.
you are a brand loyal. You are nothing if not brand loyal.
Well, I think how many times, I don't know how many times we've done this joke. I mean, it is the longest running joke on podcast history, I think. I can probably claim like Guinness Book of Records.
That's right.
But if you recall
50 years from now, when we're still doing this, people will go, okay, the joke's a little tired now. But until then, we're gonna run this thing.
Until somebody tells me. So, listener, tell me if you still think this is funny. But I remember when our friend of both of our shows, Dennis Shao, actually reached out to some of these brands on Twitter to track them over to me. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, do you remember? It was.
That's so very Dennis, though. That's the kind of thing that he would do.
Yeah, it's a very nice fella. All right, so I've given this a taste. It's delicious. I could drink one of these every week.
I suspect.
What are we calling this?
We are calling that the Christmas margarita, although technically it's a pomegranate margarita, but because it's Christmas and because we can do such things, because we have creative license to do so, we'll call it the Christmas margarita.
Nice. I love it. And where shall we be drinking such a Christmas margarita?
Well, that is a great question, but I think primarily we should be thinking about home at the moment.
Nice.
Because this is the time to be home.
Yeah.
And so I think really as we think about this, it's best if we have this virtually, you in your home and mine and mine, and we cheers each other in the virtual bar. It's sort of a bit of a meta concept, if you will. It's the virtual bar, but it's the virtual version of the virtual bar. And we have this so that we can immediately have our discussion and then move to our families to make sure that we're spending the proper and quality time with them.
Yes. Well, there's 2 points to that. One is for listeners that haven't listened since the beginning, this was a lockdown project, right? So that was the whole point of the virtual bar, to be transported away somewhere nice while we're all locked down. So it's nice that it's made that full circle back to being virtual. And the other thing is, it'd be great you'll be drinking at 10 o'clock in the morning, my friend.
Yeah, that is true. But I mean, I don't know that that's anything new. So
maybe we'll push it out to noon, and I'll just take my first drink a little later. All right, so we're on our virtual Zoom. You're taking a cocktail way earlier than you really ought to. What are we going to be talking about?
Well, I'm not sure if you've been paying attention, but there's been a little bit of news around this whole Chat GPT thing.
I posted about it the other day as well. Yeah.
Yes, well, hasn't everybody?
I
mean, I mean, I think the general consensus is that the world has needed to voice their opinion on this particular platform. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about that, being that it is the pinnacle, the penultimate, if you will, of the year. Of looking at our year in review. And of course, like many things in December, we seem to get some sort of frothy thing to happen just before Christmas. Last year, I think it was the metaverse. And this year, it seems to be generative AI and the future of marketing as a result of it.
Whatever happened to that metaverse thing?
I think there's a guy named Mark working on it in a closet somewhere. Yeah,
I'm actually doing a special on the metaverse next week with a couple of guys that dared me to do it on LinkedIn. So that's
what the hell are you talking about? I mean,
that's so 2021.
How will you fill an hour? I mean, That's my question.
It's actually 40 minutes. I've already recorded it. So, listeners, tune in, see how I managed to fill 40 minutes with the
There you go. Yes. Great. In case Robert Rose didn't just dissuade you from tuning in next week. Yeah.
So ChatGPT, let's get back to this. And by the way, I posted mine on Mastodon. So that's, I just, the coolest thing, right? Talk about ChatGPT and do it on Mastodon. That's perfect.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, and put it in the metaverse. There you go. I think is really the goal there. Well, it's, it is the popular topic right now, and I like so many people have written a little bit on it.
Yeah.
And my thinking on it, and I wanted to let it sit for a little bit.
Yeah.
As I started to read and learn and play with it, actually, because I got an account and I started looking at it.
Me too, yeah.
And if there's anybody in your audience who doesn't know what the heck we're talking about, it is a new artificial intelligence writing engine, really, more than anything else, that you ask it in natural language to write something for you or to answer a question, and in very natural language and very impressive, sort of, we'll come back to that, results. It comes back with a written piece for you, and everything from a blog post to a paragraph of text to a term paper to whatever you want, fixing code. It will do just about anything from the written word that you would like it to do, or at least attempt to do so. And as we talked about, there has been so much of many people in our profession who have written on this, and the spectrum seems to be running the full sort of Kubler-Ross, spectrum of dealing with death, from anger, denial, bargaining, acceptance, and all of that. But the two extremes seem to be either it's going to completely upend marketing fundamentally forever and everything, or that it's awful and infringing copyrights and it will be fraud and all of that. Two, it's a magical cauldron of wonderfulness, and you should all pay attention to it, and because it's going to be the most magical thing that we've ever dealt with. And I don't think any of those things are necessarily true. I find that it's somewhere usually in the middle of all of those things. And we can just simply go back to any of the other disruptive technologies that have worked through the creative process as lessons in this, all the way back to the printing press, in terms of how it has changed the idea of the creative process. I mean, one of the worries, and it's a fascinating study if you want to go back and look at it, one of the worries that happened when the printing press came out was that it would enable any old hack to write a book. And there was real concern that with the ease by which books could then be printed, that any of these sort of amateur writers would be able to flood the market with written words, and it would bury the quality words of great philosophers and teachers, et cetera. There was real worry about that. And it's an interesting thing, because that has really been the fear, the core fears, two of them, for every single technology that has come along to interrupt the creative process. Is one, there's a fear that people with no experience or no talent will suddenly be granted these superpowers that they didn't have before. Or second, the fear is that the human artisans in the creative process will be replaced by these hacks or by machines themselves. And in every single case in history, in human history, that has been an unproven and unfounded fear. So yes, those innovations have removed the need for some human participation in part of the creative process, but simultaneously, almost every one of those innovations in technology has opened a gate for a new element of creativity into the process. And so I would posit that today's content creator, writer, is no more or less talented or equipped to express ideas with ChatGPT and or any other generative AI. It is still going to be what you do with the tool, not the tool itself. It's how it changes us, not the actual change of the technology. And on that note, I ran so many experiments over the last week in writing the piece that I ultimately wrote for Content Marketing Institute. I had it write country song lyrics in the style of heavy metal. I had it write a first-person accounting of why a romantic view of Charleston, South Carolina was warranted. I had it write a limerick in the style of Dr. Seuss. I had it write all these things, and every single time when I had it write something of any level of meaning, including, by the way, I asked it a question about, tell me about a marketing guy who's having an existential career crisis about artificial intelligence. And what it came back with was impressive sentences constructed together, right? The sentences that it puts together are very impressive. It sounds very natural. The writing doesn't sound stilted. It looks and feels like it was written by a human, but the key is there is no human connection there. It doesn't build on itself. It is really nothing that resembles building a story that ultimately climaxes in some wonderful way that makes you feel satisfied for having read it. In other words, my conclusion right now is that ChatGPT, it does plot great. It does not do great storytelling. And so that's the real key here, is that we've got time to figure this out. So we should just ask the questions of ourselves, not of the AI, of how it's going to change us, because it will open new doors. It will close others, but how it changes us is still very much up to us.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was playing with it, I used it almost as a better Google experience. So just for a laugh, because I knew that it wasn't connected to the internet. So I was wondering what sort of breadth of knowledge it had. So I asked it for the best jerk chicken recipe was my first question. And it came back with a really good looking recipe that I use myself. As you know, my wife's family are from Jamaica, so it's something I need to get on point. So it was that was interesting. And then I started asking it about the Dunning-Kruger syndrome, right? So it was more of an in-depth thing, and I thought, well, this is good. But then I realized I wasn't asking it to write anything. I was just asking. I was just, like I say, it was more like a better Google experience. I was asking it questions, and it was going off and doing my research for me, if you like. And what I was getting back, because it was written, it was better than the experience I would get on Google, where you're piecing everything together for yourself.
Well, that's an interesting question, right? Because it's two different user experiences.
Yes.
It's two different use cases, really. I mean, because what you're saying is that when you ask ChatGPT for the best chicken recipe, you're ostensibly assuming that whatever it comes back with is the best.
Yes.
And so there's a level of quote unquote trust there that doesn't exist when you go to the Google. When you go to the Google and you ask for the best chicken recipe, what you're looking for is the source of the chicken recipe that you're about to look at, and you're going to adjudicate yourself what the best one is, and it requires you putting those things together. And so it's interesting. Someone else said, they posted on social media, which I thought was interesting, which was they asked it a question and it came back with an answer that wasn't right. In other words, it was an answer that was incorrect, which, by the way, it's very easy to get incorrect answers from it.
Right.
And it said, they said, the interesting thing is they blamed the technology, and they said, this is something that will get fixed in the future. And I said, it actually won't. I said, because the problem with, AI is that it takes the mean. It takes the bell curve of the average as the truth. In other words, it looks at the internet and it says whatever the most popular or most resonant fact is the one I'm going to return. Because it's the one most widely recognized as being accurate. It's a self-reinforcing model, right? That's how they teach the AI is that if more people say this is right, then it's right. Exactly. And unfortunately, that's not the way the world works.
Well, and we'll all start using it like it's Wikipedia or something, and assume that the source is correct. I mean, what I think it was something you interacted with on social media, wasn't that the ChatGPT said that HubSpot was the author of something, and it absolutely totally wasn't it? Something
there's that for sure. I mean, it's interesting because the one that I asked it for the writing of the piece that I just finished was I used a Marshall McLuhan example. The medium is the message and all of that, and of course it's a blog post around content. Of course you bring media, and of course you bring Marshall McLuhan to bear. And as one does. And I asked it, I said, oh, that's interesting, because there's a famous quote our tools, we shape our tools, and then thereafter our tools shape us, which is widely misattributed to Marshall McLuhan. And I only know this because I've studied McLuhan, and I know he never said it, but it's his idea, but it was actually something that was written by a friend of his about his ideas.
Wow.
And it never gets attributed to that person. And so interestingly, I went to ChatGPT and I said, who said we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us? And it came back with, it's attributed to Marshall McLuhan.
Right.
And it's because the world attributes it to him. And so even those simple facts, it makes it less useful than Google, because even if you Google that, what you'll find is people who actually correct the idea.
Right.
And exactly. So you'll get the abundance of opinions on this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, that's before you even get to the subtle things like bias, right? So if you're getting the facts wrong,
right? Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, and that's another thing, right?
Yeah. I was, I'm inspired by all this jazz that's going on about GPT, and also I posted on LinkedIn because I noticed the other day that Grammarly was correcting itself. So it made a bunch of it. I was writing something, and it. I
love that post of yours. I love that post. That was it was so good. Yeah.
But that's what I saw. I watched it. It suggested some corrections. I made the corrections, and then it suggested corrections for its corrections, right? And this went on for about 3 iterations, and I thought, hang on, is this the future? And what I also was thinking about was, if you think about authors that you like to read, and I'm going to write about this out of this, is actually personality. You don't get the personality in content, and that's going to be the human difference, isn't it? In content, it's going to be the personality of how you express that in those words. Because I was thinking about, does Anne Handley accept Grammarly changes? People,
right.
proper right. I can't imagine her sitting accepting Grammarly changes because she'll want the quirks in her copy, which are exactly. I think everybody knows who Anne Handley is, right? And
that's exactly right. Yeah.
What a fantastic thought. So for the non-robot written content of yours, where might they find that, Robert?
Well, they'll find the piece that I wrote on contentmarketinginstitute.com's blog, which is, as I just said, I sort of self-referenced it. It was weird, wasn't it? On contentmarketinginstitute.com, you'll find that one is where I regularly write a weekly post.
Excellent. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
They will find me not on Twitter. Well, I'm on Twitter, but I'm not on Twitter. I'm sort of lurking in Twitter, as it were. I'm not posting anything because the man-child is basically ruining the whole joint for everybody, and I don't want my content monetizing his nonsense. But I am lurking there. But mostly you'll find me on LinkedIn. I'm sort of doubling down on LinkedIn these days.
Right, splendid. All right, mate. I'll include all those links in the show notes. And most importantly for me, and it's going to be Christmas Eve, will I see you in the bar next week?
You will indeed, for I guess it will be a wonderful holiday version of what we're doing.
I very much look forward to that. Thank you very much. I'll see you then.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you, Robert. The robots writing our content is a big topic at the moment, and I'll include a link to Robert's excellent article he wrote for the Content Marketing Institute in the show notes. So, that's a wrap on episode 145 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks to Jeff, Todd and Robert for sharing their insight, but most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. What do you think? Does the world need another effing marketing podcast? How about letting us know with a rating or review in your favourite podcast app? Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week with Jeff away, I dive into the metaverse with Mark Demany, Head of Product Strategy at Uniform, and omnichannel expert Noz Urbina. And Robert will be back to celebrate the holidays at our virtual bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.